We've been talking about theory in rhetorical criticism, and we'll continue that lesson here with a slightly deeper dive into the two schools of theory that are most prominent right now. Remember, a theory is a perspective. It's a way of understanding the world that you live in. But that means, of course, that it's also a way to understand the insights given to you by your method. Method gives us insights into how a rhetorical artifact is working, right? And theory helps us understand what those insights might mean to us. So that's the world we're going to be working with. Now, theory is a process of contemplating in a non-mystical way, just simply a process of giving your absolute, full, undivided attention to something. And there are in our field two basic schools of thought: the constitutive and the mimetic schools of theory. So those are the two that we want to look at today. We've taken a peek at them before. We'll go deeper today. So in a nutshell, remember, the constitutive is a claim that social reality is built by our words, that words have this power of structuring the world we live in and that we experience. We can make that world into what we will, or at least bend it to some degree. We can change it into what we will by the force of our language. The mimetic school of theory is one that says language tries not to bend the world to its will, but not to bend the world to the will of the speaker, but to try and describe a certain kind of social reality. And that reality does not change because of our words. So that's the fundamental difference. In the constitutive world, we're changing the world. We're constituting what our world is by the use of our language. In the mimetic world, meaning the world of imitation, I mean, not imitation in terms of falsehood, but of representation, we're trying to use language to represent a reality that is outside of our language and that is indifferent to it, we would say. So those are the two different perspectives. Now it's time now to take a closer look at each of those. We'll look at basically their strengths, and we'll look at their weaknesses. That should set us up to consider their uses as well in coming lessons. So we'll begin with the constitutive view. Pros on the constitutive view. It seems pretty clear, intuitively sound, that how we talk about our experiences certainly has some impact on how we're going to perceive them, of course. And the flip side is also true, that our perceptions end up at one level, shaping our experiences and our discourse about those experiences, right? That seems pretty clear also. I mean, it also seems pretty clear that our experiences come together to create kind of a whole view. All right, so if we pay attention to our lives, all of these claims are pretty sound, right? I mean, you know, obviously, if somebody comes to us and describes something as a crisis, that's different from somebody describing something as a challenge, and it will often lead to a shaping of our own perspectives on that reality. So yeah, sure, that seems pretty intuitively sound. It seems like it holds up in terms of how we experience the world and how the world comes at us. But the question is, how far can we push that claim of being able to constitute our reality? Where are the limits of those claims? Okay, well, you know, it seems pretty clear that at one level, brute reality does not change. When we talk about brute reality, we're talking about, you know, just the conditions of the world around us that are simply immune to language. I can go outside and I can talk to my car until day after tomorrow, and I will never talk it into being an airplane. Okay, you can't change certain aspects of reality. So that's the first thing to notice, is that, of course, there are limits, right? If Wile E. Coyote is pursuing the Roadrunner and he walks off the end of a cliff, what's going to happen to Wile E. Coyote? Well, Wile E. Coyote is going to fall and hit the ground, right? That's what's going to happen. So, you know, this view that our language can somehow structure and shape our reality, well, obviously it has that kind of a limit, all right? So we're not talking today, I mean, early on, perhaps in the last half of the 20th century, people talked about whether or not there was even a material reality that existed apart from our language and so forth. But most people today are willing to say there's this kind of materiality that's out there, and that's not what we're talking about. Like, you know, it's obviously simply not true that we can construct any kind of world we want with our words. We cannot build a world with our words where water flows uphill, right? That's just not an option. You can't build a circle that has a right angle in it. Certain things are just impossible. They're impossible with words. They're impossible, you know, with anything else. So when we say that we're using language to build reality, what is it that we mean? Well, we don't mean that we're trying to change brute reality. All right, that's not what we're up against. So what are we doing? Well, often we mean that we're using language to construct or to constitute some part of our social realities. And that's often the way it's framed and talked about. The kind of world we live in. That's what we mean by social reality. The kind of world we experience, if you wish. So that we're building something like our own perspective, our own view of the world. And my particular view of the world is the one that I'm focused on and that I'm thinking about, and that and the way we talk, language, discourse, discussion, all of that is going on around me in a way that helps me see and create that perspective that is mine on the world around me. Now, when I create this perspective, I'm sort of, you know, walking my own path. And of course, everyone else is too, right? That's everyone else is doing the same thing. So like we said, our experiences shape our discourse, and our discourse shapes our experiences, and that seems pretty reliable, and it seems important to realize and good to hold in mind, of course, that everyone has their own unique set of experiences that have shaped their worldview as well. So everybody's walking their own path. So that seems a little bit clearer. But that ends up raising a different question for us in regard to how the constitutive world looks. If everybody is forming their own path, and if everybody is finding their own way, we have another kind of problem. We often talk and think about these unique perspectives, and we like to as much as possible, champion the idea that every one of these views, every one of these paths has an equality. It's valid. It's equally valid, equally acceptable. People get to say yes to it. We are supposed to say yes to other people's paths too, because their path is theirs and ours is ours. Okay, good at some level, but there's a way in which that really doesn't make sense. Okay, it simply isn't true that every view that gets crafted, every path that gets walked is an equally valid path. We all feel the need to point out that, you know, some things, you know, are simply not acceptable. You know, genocide, racism, slavery. These are not the right way to build a social life. And we feel a sort of urge to note that there are paths that simply are not workable. Okay. Now, not workable, not because they violate some brute reality, but not workable because it's not a social world we want to live in. We don't want to build that kind of world because we don't like that kind of a world. Okay. That is a situation where we have to say, okay, we're up against something here now. Is it just disagreement? So, you know, I've got somebody who is a racist or a fan of you know, certain kinds of genocide, and now what do? Do we just have some kind of a disagreement that falls into the same category as you know, whether or not you want to go out for Chinese or Mexican food tonight? I mean, is it that kind of a disagreement where there's nothing really at stake? Well, no, this is a disagreement where there's serious things at stake. And when we find ourselves in those kinds of situations, we take another path. We want to actively note that if you are trying to construct that kind of society, you're doing something wrong. That is the wrong kind of society to build. And we want to be able to say also, as a counter to that, here's the right kind of society to build. Here's a good society. This is a better society than yours. So all of a sudden, our sense that every path is equal, we put that aside. And when we face that, when we come to that place where we're saying, well, no, the racist, the people who want to do harm, to neglect what's good and right, who speak in terms of how it would be a good idea to hate certain people, that's just out of bounds. That's wrong. When we begin to say that sort of thing, well, the constitutive view of language puts us in a place where we're doing something that's really hard to justify. We're doing something that's hard to do. If we say language constructs our social reality, or if we say social reality is linguistically constructed, same thing, then I kind of have a hard time stepping in and going on to say, yeah, but you can't construct that kind of social reality. Okay. I have a hard time turning to a blatant racist and saying, well, you shouldn't build that kind of a society with your words. If the racist says, well, why not? And I reply, well, because it's wrong. The racist can come back and say, well, it's wrong in the kind of world you're trying to build. It's not wrong in the kind of world I'm trying to build. The world where I'm trying to build things, this is a good thing. This is the right thing. That's the sort of world we really want. That's how I see it. Okay, now, what do we do? Yikes. Okay. That puts me in a tough situation because I have already said social reality is whatever we build with our words. Okay, I'm in a tough place now, because if social reality is whatever we build with our words, what do I say to someone who's trying to build a social reality I don't like? It seems almost like I'm limited to, well, I don't like that. And that's not a very strong case to make. That's kind of a weak case. So how do I make a stronger case in the constitutive worldview? That's a challenge. It's a really tough question. If you have a constitutive view of the world, making a case that this shouldn't be done, that's tougher. There's a should in there, and that should gets us into a lot of trouble, because in the constitutive world, what you should do is simply the consequence of what we built. If we build it where you should hate everybody who has, long hair or an earring or, glasses, if that's the kind of world we build, well, then that's a good thing. If we build a world, if we build language, if we can constitute a society where everybody with glasses is a second-class citizen, well, then it's good to treat people with glasses as a second-class citizen. Does the definition shift? Well, that's, the definition of good does shift. That's the constitutive view, that the way we talk, the way we discuss shifts the definition of our terms. Okay, that's one position. That's one place where we are, all right? But if that's a quick view of the constitutive theory of language, let's turn over and look a little bit now at the mimetic view of language, all right? In the mimetic world, we also have pros and we have, some challenges and cons. Here are the pros. The mimetic view of language, it kind of, sort of solves the moral dilemma that we were in just a moment ago. In the constitutive theories, if you change the way we talk about justice, you change what justice is. The reality of justice changes if we redefine it. We are negotiating and redefining things all the time. And once we settle on a definition and we say it is just that people who wear glasses should not be allowed to hold jobs or to purchase homes or to drive cars, if we say that's just, then that's just, because we constituted justice that way. We constructed justice with our language in that frame. All right, that's the constitutive theory. And that creates the problem we just saw, where people can start trying to basically rebrand horrifying ideas. And if we can get them up and get some momentum, then we change what is just, what is right, what is good. Okay. And there are very limited ways for us to respond to that. Okay. But in the mimetic theories, there's a different idea. Okay. Here in these theories, Justice is not something we're building. Justice is something already built. It's finished. And it wasn't finished by, our grandparents. It's not some nostalgia looking back. Rather, real justice is a thing that is unchanging and fixed. So in this world of the mimetic, justice is like a mountain, okay, that is up there and hidden from sight. In this particular point of view, real justice is part of that brute reality that we were talking about at the beginning of the constitutive view. Okay, everybody agrees that I can't talk my mouse into turning into a truck. Okay, that's not going to happen. Okay, we all get that. Language doesn't do that. All right. Brute reality doesn't shift or change according to my words. In the mimetic view, justice is part of brute reality. It's not physical like a mountain, but it's as real as a mountain. It is rock solid. It is impervious to your words. You can go out to the mountain here, and you can tell that mountain all day long that you wish it would turn into a large heaping pile of cherry vanilla ice cream, and it won't. Okay, it doesn't change. It is, we say, indifferent to language. That's the quality that justice has. In the mimetic view, it is fixed and it doesn't shift or change. Now, that means that our words do not construct justice. So what do? Our words set out not to build justice, but to describe justice. So we're trying to create a description of something that is real and fixed and doesn't change. That's the mimetic view. But if I'm describing something that's real and fixed and doesn't change, guess what? It means that I can build a description that is accurate. I can describe justice correctly. I can get it right. Or, surprise, surprise, I can get it wrong. If I'm describing a reality that is fixed, it's like, what have I got in my pocket? Remember? Well, if I describe that reality, something's real, something's there in my pocket. If I describe it, my description can be closer or further from the reality. That's where we are. Our descriptions work like that. Now, our descriptions can be right or wrong. And that, of course, gets us to one of the challenges of the mimetic theory. So if the mimetic theory is approaching this idea of justice and sort of solving the challenge of us kind of creating justice on our own terms and doing whatever we want with it, and if the mimetic theory says, no, you can't do that, reality is fixed. And justice is part of the fixed reality that's out there. That doesn't change. So you're going to have to try to describe justice, and you can get it right or you can get it wrong. Okay, great. That begs rather a serious question. And that question is, well, okay, how do you know when you get your description of justice right? How do you know which of these descriptions here is correct and which one is wrong? How do I know that the top description is more accurate than the lower description? Well, that's a tough question. Okay, now that is a hard question. How do you understand? How do you know if you're describing justice, good? How do you know if you're describing it correctly? Well, obviously, the people who embrace mimetic theory, they have an answer to that question, but it's a hard answer, okay? It's a really challenging answer, but that's only fair because it's a really challenging question. I mean, if you ask a college level question, you can't expect a fourth grade answer, right? Okay, this is a college level question. How in the world can you know whether or not your description of justice is correct? Or how do you have confidence in your description of justice? Okay, tough question, tough answer. All right. Real justice, remember, is always hidden. That mountain that's there behind the castle, that's real justice. It's rock solid. But you and me, we live in a world where we can't see that kind of thing. That kind of reality is not present to our senses. We don't see, hear, smell, taste justice, right? We do, however, have something else. In the world around us, in a kind of distorted, wobbly way, we do get images of justice. We get reflections of justice, like we see here in the lake, right? Down there in the lake, we get kind of this reflection of that reality that is just. Okay, that's the world we live in. We live in a world where there are images of justice. We see things and we go, yeah, you know what? That's right. That's right. And you know what over here? That's wrong. And we have these intuitions, we have these instincts. Yeah, we're taught them, but they go back further than just my own private petty education. And so we see, according to the mimeticists, we see the people who embrace mimetic theory, we see these images of justice. And from those images of justice that are present in our world, we begin to form an understanding of justice in our intellect. So we move from real justice that's out there fixed, unchanging, indifferent to our language, and we have these images, distortions, partial glimpses of that reality in the reflections, the distorted reflections of the world around us. And from those distorted reflections, we build our own understanding. Now, if it looks like it's getting harder and harder to read the further down you go, that's not by accident, right? That's exactly how the mimetic theorist thinks of the world. Real justice is clear and clean if you could see it, but you can't. So you've got these wavering images of justice, and from that, we build our understanding. That means, since I know that my understanding is partial and incomplete, that means that I have to compare my understanding with what other people think and understand. We have discourse, we have debate about why my view about justice and your view about justice are different. And we do that in order that we can exchange perspectives and build a more accurate, according to the mimeticist, a more accurate description of justice. Now that's subtle, but it's a very real difference from the constitutive view. Now, the constitutive view says, hey, we get together, we negotiate what we want justice to mean. Okay, the mimetic view says we're all getting, we can't negotiate what justice means. Justice, the meaning of justice is already established. We're just trying to figure out what it is. We're trying to describe it, define it accurately. We're not getting to make this up. We don't get to just sort of make it up whole cloth. We've got to figure it out. It's already over there. We got to see it. And we got to sort of exchange views so that we all get a better idea. So those, there is a subtle difference between those 2 points of view. Both of them are going to end up talking at the end. But that subtle difference is quite real and it's quite important. Okay, let's think about the constitutive then. When we disagree over the idea of justice, what is it that we can do? How is it possible for me to persuade you? How does that happen? How do I accomplish that? Well, if all constructions of reality are equal, then the only thing I can say that is genuinely true is that I don't like your definition of justice. I don't like your picture of justice. The way you want justice to be is not how I want justice to be. I prefer my view. So justice gets reduced to a preference. But of course, the response is from the other side, well, I don't prefer your view. I prefer my view. Okay, how do you resolve that issue? Well, what reasons can I give you to accept my view? Not many. That's our problem in the constitutive view, right? In this sort of tangle that we're looking at. The constitutive view has a hard time giving reasons because in the constitutive view, justice is just going to be whatever we define it to be. What that means is, if justice is just a matter of preference, then the only way to approach disagreements is either to resort to some sort of manipulation or power. Power is the only way to resolve difference. Because, now why is power important? Because, remember, justice is going to be whatever we decide. So whoever has the most power is going to write the definition. So I have to be sure that my group has the most power. That's one way to approach it. That's one way to look at it. So in that kind of a situation, justice is power. Truth is power. Whoever has the most power fills up the definitions. That's different in the mimetic view. Now we face the same questions here, okay? Here, we've got exactly the same challenge looming over us. What reasons can I give you to accept my view about justice? Well, here it's a little different, okay? In the mimetic view, we have a situation that Perlman and Ulbrecht's Taitecha, remember in the New Rhetoric, they call it the noble rhetoric. Noble rhetoric, all right? That is, what makes rhetoric noble is when I can give you reasons that lay outside of my own private arbitrary preferences. In other words, I can give you reasons that go beyond, I just want it to be like this. All right. When I can give you reasons that reach beyond my own arbitrary preferences, that appeal to something that is outside of my own heart and mind and will, outside of me, and incidentally outside of you, and incidentally outside of the relationship between us. When I can tap into something like that, then I am tapping into something that is above us and can help define our relationship, okay? Now, we have the possibility at that point of doing noble discourse, noble rhetoric. We'll take a look at a little bit more about what that means in just half a second. But basically, we have that potential. We have that possibility, all right? There is no guarantee. The mimetic view does not guarantee that there will be noble rhetoric, okay? Let's be very clear about this. It simply says that if you take this theoretical view, you have the possibility, you have that option, because our rhetoric around what we want the world to be like, our rhetoric about justice, is like a complicated math problem, okay? There's a right answer, and some answers are much closer than others. So our understanding of justice can be argued as right or wrong, not on the basis of what I want. It can be argued as right and wrong on the basis of things like disciplined reasoning about, and a sense of the scope of human experience and feeling, the power of proven authorities that have the ability to have a track record for helping human beings make good decisions over a long time in a wide variety of settings. Okay, that's beginning to look familiar. It should, right? The new rhetoric suggests, it's not the only one, but the new rhetoric suggests that's where you want to be. You want to be in a place where we can tap into things that are not what I want and what you want. We want to tap into things that are outside of our own desires. Reason is outside of what I want and what you want. The scope of human experience, the general sense of how human beings respond to certain events, okay, that's a fairly reliable aspect of our experiences that seems to cut across a lot of different cultures. So we can tap into that. It has power that is outside of what I want or you want. Ethos, outside of what I want, you want. Okay, so we get these places where then we can tap into other ways of discoursing about how justice will be understood. So in the mimetic view, justice is, in fact, an accurate understanding of this inflexible reality. that's out there, okay? Genuine discourse, noble rhetoric is a possibility when both sides of those who are discussing, right? When both sides of people who are in a disagreement recognize that our understanding of real justice is partial and incomplete because it's based on a very limited view of one reflection of justice that we can see in the world around us. Now, that process that you go through, where we develop our understanding by examining the reflections of a fixed and unchanging reality, that's the key to the mimetic view. That's what the mimetic view says. That's the process you go through when you begin to combine reasoning, when you begin to combine human experience, a whole wide scope of human experience, and proven authorities that have a really solid track record. That's how you can begin to create reasons to support the idea that my understanding of justice is superior to the racists. Okay, that gives us a place to start, kind of, sort of. But you have to understand that a person with a mimetic view says, hey, I think my view of rhetoric is more right than somebody else's. It doesn't mean that we're talking here about fanatics or narrow-minded fundamentalist sorts. Of course, there are any number of very different perspectives and experiences that are out there doing the same thing from different locations and having different understandings of this reflection of justice. It's those differences that the mimetic theory is going to recognize and focus on and say, oh, okay, you're seeing something else. Come here, show me, teach me how to see more of justice than I'm seeing, because I only have one perspective and you've got a different perspective. Come, let's compare notes. I can teach you something about justice. You can teach me something about justice. Let's understand this better. This reality that's out there. Again, we're not building that reality. It's just that I saw this one part. You saw a different part. Help me understand and see more of justice than I saw on my own. All right, that's what makes noble rhetoric. It's this process of discourse where we learn from those different points of view. That's what makes the mimetic theory able to engage in real discourse, according to the mimeticist. Okay, so to say this is right, my perspective is correct, it's not arrogance or manipulation. Okay, that's not what's going on. It's an opportunity. Basically, the mimetic view is saying, discourse is now a possibility, nothing more. Okay, nothing guaranteed, but it becomes a possibility. Whereas in the constitutive view, according to the mimetic critique, in the constitutive view, discourse is never a possibility because everything keeps getting reduced to manipulation and power. Okay, that's where we are. All right. Now, in the mimetic view, justice is this accurate understanding of the world. But in the field today, we would say the dominant perspective is the constitutive view. Okay, that's the theory, that's the family of theory that is most likely to inform our readings today. So when we finish our methodological process of analysis and we've got an understanding of how this artifact is functioning, when we turn to try and figure out what that means, most critics in our field today are going to try and understand it from a constitutive point of view. They're going to try to understand it from questions of manipulation and power. They're going to try to understand it from questions of identity and force. Okay, now we're going to look at that. That's what we're going to do next. All right, constitutive theories dominant in the field. Are there mimetic theories out there? Sure, they're there. But for the most part, from here on out, we're looking at the constitutive theories because those are the ones that are most used and employed in our field. That's the perspective that dominates. So we're going to be turning to how the constitutive theory guides and directs interpretation. That's what's coming up in our next lessons. So we'll be looking at theory more, we'll be focusing more and more on its role in criticism in our next lessons.